One weekend, I was house-sitting for my grandmother while she traveled to Florida with some of her church buddies. Beside her room, in the guest bedroom, I was asleep. When we stayed at her house, my brother and I would sleep in two twin beds within the guest bedroom. I checked all the doors to be sure they were locked before settling into the bed next to the window. I woke early when I went to bed and didn't really fall asleep for a little. Not much was there to do at my grandma's house. I spent an hour on my phone watching videos, texting folks, etc. That's when I realized I could begin to hear someone outside speaking. It sounded like a hello from a woman. Trying to listen, I left the bedroom and slinked towards the front door, moving gently. Her voice was only hello every 10 seconds. I discovered that it seemed to be coming from as I approached the front door. Though my grandma's dining room's windows provide, her entrance lacks the folks. I went over to that window to try to see who was out there since I had a clear view of the front porch. I guess I didn't do a good job of that since when I glanced, I did notice a woman on my grandma's porch, and she was looking right at me as if she knew I would be looking through those blinds. I attempted peering my head in between the plastic slats without making it obvious. She greeted me once more, this time sporting a somewhat weird smile. Though she was older, don't envision this woman as some innocent-looking, little, elderly lady. She seemed to be perhaps in her early 60s, late 50s, and something about her face just turned me off. I turned away from the window and considered maybe one of my grandmother's acquaintances. Midnight, though. Why would anyone come to the door this way? Why would she not knock or ring the bell? Why was she repeatedly standing out there waving hello? I felt really disturbed. I went back to the guest bedroom and closed the door now instead of before, and I could not hear that woman anymore. Where was she, and maybe who was that? I simply decided to go. About it, I started messaging everyone. My sister's friends, telling them how strange it was. But a good bit of time passed in silence, and I was beginning to cool off. Although my sisters advised me to call Grandma, there was little possibility she was awake, and she seldom ever even checked her cell phone. Something disturbed the quiet exactly like that. Not a knocking or tapping, but rather a hammer at the window. Shortly after, my body went into fight or flight mode, and I felt great suffering in my chest area. The screaming ceases. A familiar voice says hello with that surge of adrenaline. I suppose my extra confidence let me take the blinds and raise them, face to face with his terrible older mother, just a thin piece of glass separating us. I found myself yelling at her grinning, filthy face, "I'm calling the cops." I drew the blind back down and dashed back to the living room. Looking about the home, I hurried upstairs to box myself into the guest bedroom. I'm not sure why I wanted to avoid really phoning the cops. Just hold off. I curled under the covers after crawling into the bed in the guest bedroom upstairs. I woke up a few hours later and finally, only then, returned downstairs to gaze out. Every window that seemed weird old lady vanished. I told my grandmother what occurred when she called the next morning. Clearly terrified and disturbed, she began screaming into the phone. She told me that a few days ago, some woman around 10 years younger than her was watching her at the grocery store. Not sure why, I grinned at her and advised her to cool off. Though I wasn't sure whether to link the two or not, I did have to give it some thought when we finally got off the phone together. My grandma is 75. She has lost some of her wits, so I do have to take some of the things she says with a grain of salt. But the way she screamed into the phone about the woman in the shop truly made me shudder. I still wonder whether it may have been the same individual. Currently a freshman at Syracuse University, my name is Nicholas, and neither precisely lie in the most secure location. They simply broke up with my first girlfriend, so I started returning to the internet dating environment. I came into some blonde female named Stephanie, whom I really bonded with using that Hinge. She went to Syracuse as well. We both enjoy seeing movies and reading. We shared even the same sense of humor. She agreed she loved to go on a movie date when I proposed it. She instructed me to meet her at some designated location close to the university, and she would pick me up. Hence, about 9 o'clock, I waited on some corner of a standard neighborhood block, just waiting for Stephanie. She asked me to let her know where I was, so I did. A few minutes later, I watched an automobile stop along the street and begin to approach me. It stopped then in front of me, and the driver pulled down the window. But that was some old random man, not Stephanie. Indeed, what I was doing here alone seemed somewhat strange. I said first of all that I was waiting for somebody. When he asked whether I was waiting for Stephanie, I answered, "Yeah, how'd you know?" Declaring himself Stephanie's father, he instructed me to hop so he could drive me to her. I gave him a thorough look. He seemed a little elderly to be her father. To be honest, I'm not dumb when it comes to dubious circumstances. Thus, I stated firmly, "Why didn't you tell me you would be picking me up?" He said he wanted to meet me first and didn't trust a random man running across his kid. I looked at the man once more, this time more deliberately, and said nothing. I just started moving in the other way from his car's orientation. He began to yell, "Hey, hey," sounding, though I had heard far too many kidnapping stories to know where this could possibly go. I was astonished to be just walking away like that. Turning to make sure the guy wasn't turning around to follow me, I heard his car moving. He drove straight and turned left out of sight, so releasing a sigh of relief. I kept strolling toward campus along the block. I arrived at the block's corner. Simply as I was ready to turn, I saw what I most definitely knew was the identical automobile the man was driving simply parked on the side of the road. Road with the lights off, I looked momentarily into the window as I passed, but the glass was tinted. I tried not to show that I was dubious and carried on walking. The so-called Stephanie person texted me asking, "Why did you not accompany my dad in the car?" I carried on strolling, neglecting the book. I kept staring back to see whether the car would move. I turned right and then completely unbooked it in the direction of college when he arrived at a traffic crossroads. Not surprisingly, I was not followed. I returned to the college. Out of breath, I started toward my dorm. Though I considered maybe I was being crazy, I felt like I could hear footsteps trailing me. I knew I was being tailed when I heard someone's sneaker kick a piece of broken glass. I made a point of dodging behind a van and stopped to allow me time to listen for where the footfall originated. They were a few cars away from me, and I realized I never told Stephanie where I was, or should I say man. I saw him. That man was old. He was approaching from. He said something. I didn't completely grasp what was between two cars across from me, but it seemed like he said, "Come back and I'll take you to her." He had to be like a 60-something. I could not see him catching me if I ran. When I raced back to my dorm room, I easily lost him. I had no one to discuss it with since my roommate wasn't there, but it was startling when I slept in my bed and found another text from that man. "You are," remarked, "a small piece of undersurf. You're glad you left. I would have choked your ugly ass. Still, I have a screenshot." I said, "Thanks for the threat." I blocked his number. It is directly headed to the cops. I intend to show the cops the chat I still have preserved as proof finally. With any luck, they can act to change things. I worked as a part-time janitor at my high school as a side gig when I was 18. I would work occasionally days and occasionally evenings over the summer, anywhere from 9 a.m. depending on my need for money to 12 a.m. usually. I would be left to lock the building after the departing elderly janitors. One night, one of my bosses, Tom, had to go early, so I would be finishing up the rest of my shift alone and shutting down for the evening at a time when the high school had cameras installed in every single hallway. As he usually did, he advised me to text him if I needed anything. Then he went. When I was left alone, I loved it, as normally I worked half an hour and then hung about on my phone or went early and still received payment for the entire shift. With the things I got away with in that environment, I most certainly pushed it. Before leaving, Tom instructed me to transport all the spare gymnasium seats from the assembly down to the basement storage area. I decided I would do that and then head home. Taking a stack of 6 chairs, I began to walk it down to the basement. The storage room's lights were somewhat low. They kind of sucked. That school's basement wasn't exactly lovely overall. It resembled a warehouse less like a cellar. Still, there were what seemed to be a number of art mannequins draped with paint cloths, those large blanket-looking objects. Every art supply in the school seems to be kept down here. I dumped the stack of chairs down where the remaining chairs were kept and returned up to the gym to pick more. One of the mannequins was seen when I returned down with more seats. Now the blanket was taken off the top of it. It was covered minutes earlier, clearly since it was one of the front persons. I texted Tom suggesting someone might be down in the basement. Back he said, "What do you mean?" And I mentioned that one of the art cloths moved. Saying no one else should be there, he paused to answer, and I observed something. The art cloth stashed in the corner of the storage room, sitting outside of the light generated in the middle of the room. Covered something, definitely. I started to creep over to it, and when I was a few feet away, I realized whatever was under that fabric, it was moving just ever so little. Therefore, very gently, a text at the top stating someone is hidden under a cloth in the basement suggests there was definitely someone hiding down there and fled upstairs, locking the cellar door. He advised calling the police, but I asked him to just come back since he only left 10 minutes earlier, though he did not wish to return. He advised me to be a man and face whoever was down there. Hence, it sounded like a basement once more. But suddenly the cloth lay flat on the floor, and whatever was hidden under there vanished. Maybe the scariest thing was still yet. As I stood in the storage area, above my head there were strong metallic thumps. Looking up, I saw slowly developing indents in the big air vents above me. I understood what was happening, but officially I was done with this. Someone was crawling over the main deck and then simply stopped practically above me. Bang, 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 like whomever was in there was trying to burst up the floor of the air vents. I shut down the school, bolted up the stairs, and headed home. The next day, I told Tom the partial truth, but I believed I spotted someone in. I stated there was nothing else I could say. The corner vanished when I returned. They understood. It was my last week there, so I stopped worrying about it.